Over 100 years ago, before paved roads and electric lines stitched the land together, there was a town called Salt Creek. It did not appear on most maps. The town lay nestled in a shallow valley, where the ground tasted bitter and a white residue clung to the soil after rain. Salt bled up from the earth there, poisoning crops and staining boots, and so nothing larger than scrub grass ever grew. Travelers rarely stopped. Those who did often said the place felt unfinished, like a thought abandoned halfway through. Salt Creek was made of 37 buildings, not counting barns or sheds, a church with no bell, a schoolhouse that never held more than 12 children, a sheriff's office built from warped timber and optimism. And at the far edge of town, half sunk into the pale ground, stood the Ledger House, a narrow two-story structure with blackened windows and a door that never seemed quite closed. Salt Creek survived because of the road. The road cut straight through the valley, a necessary artery between larger settlements. Wagons, traders, preachers, and sometimes criminals passed through. Salt Creek fed them, watered their horses, and took their coins. And when they left, the town exhaled and waited for the next set of strangers. However, in the winter of 1891, something happened that altered the town so profoundly that, within a generation, no one remained to recall it, except the land. On the morning of January 14th, Sheriff Caleb Moreland found a body nailed to the schoolhouse door. The man's name was Edgar Pike, though no one in town called him that. They called him Ledger Pike because he worked as a clerk and record keeper for Salt Creek. He kept track of debts, land claims, births, deaths, and quiet arrangements that never made it into official county books. He was a thin man with ink-stained fingers and a habit of smiling too late. Now he was dead. 3 iron spikes pinned him upright, through the wrists and sternum, like a grotesque notice posted for the town to read. His eyes were open. His mouth was stuffed with torn pages from a ledger, the paper soaked dark with blood and saliva. Moreland stood in the cold, breath fogging, and felt the wrongness of it settle into his bones. Salt Creek had seen violence before, drunken fights, a shooting over a card game. A man was once beaten nearly to death for stealing a horse. But this was deliberate, symbolic, and it had been done in the night without a sound. By noon, the entire town had gathered in the square. No one spoke above a whisper. Mothers pulled children close. Men avoided looking at the body for too long, as if it might recognize them. The preacher, Reverend Amos Bell, made the sign of the cross despite not being Catholic. He kept records, Bell said quietly. Someone wanted them silenced. Moreland didn't answer. He was staring at Pike's hands. They were clean. Too clean. No blood beneath the fingernails. No sign of struggle. Which meant Edgar Pike had not fought. Which meant he had known his killer. Moreland ordered Pike's body taken down and carried to the undertaker. Then he went straight to the Ledger House. Inside, the air smelled of old paper and brine. Shelves lined the walls, sagging under the weight of books. Ledgers of every size, some bound in leather, others stitched crudely together. Dates scratched on spines, names written, crossed out, written again. Moreland had never liked this place. Pike lived alone above his workroom. He claimed he preferred solitude, but everyone knew the truth. People did not like being around a man who knew too much. Moreland searched the desk. Most ledgers were still there, but one was missing. A black book. Moreland knew it existed because Pike once mentioned it while drunk. Said it wasn't meant for numbers, but for balances. Said some debts couldn't be measured in money. Moreland had laughed then. He wasn't laughing now. Suspicion fell quickly, as it always does in small towns. Thomas Greer, the blacksmith, had argued with Pike days earlier over land taxes. Martha Wynne, who ran the boarding house, had lost her husband after Pike adjusted a deed. Jonah Hale, a quiet farmhand, had once been whipped for theft based on Pike's testimony alone. Each had a motive. None had blood on their hands. Moreland questioned them one by one. Each denied it. Each seemed genuinely afraid, not of the law, but of something else. "What aren't you telling me?" Moreland asked Jonah Hale. Jonah swallowed. "You won't believe me." "Try." Jonah shook his head. "If I say it out loud, it'll be heard." Moreland dismissed him, uneasy. That night, Moreland dreamed of ledgers opening on their own, pages turning, names bleeding through the paper like wounds. Martha Wynne did not scream. That was what unsettled Sheriff Moreland most. The boarding house sat close to the center of Salt Creek, its windows facing the square like tired eyes. On most nights, light glowed there until late, travelers laughing, cutlery clinking, the soft chaos of human presence. But on the night Martha Wynne died, the house went dark early, too early. When Moreland pushed open the kitchen door just before dawn, the hinges did not creak. They had been oiled recently. Martha lay on her back beside the long wooden table where she used to knead bread. One arm was folded neatly across her chest, the other stretched toward the floor as if she had been reaching for something dropped. Her throat had been cut with precision, not the wild slash of panic or rage, but a single practiced motion, clean, efficient. There was almost no blood on the floor. Most of it had been caught in a bowl placed carefully beneath her neck, as if someone had wanted to collect it. Moreland noticed then how the kitchen smelled, not of iron or death, but of salt and boiled water. On the wall above her body, nailed with two thin spikes, hung the ledger page. The handwriting was unmistakable, Edgar Pike's hand. The townsfolk gathered silently behind Moreland as he stepped aside to let them see. No one spoke, no one prayed. They read. A list of names, 8 in total, 6 were crossed out. Martha Wynne's name had been struck through so hard that the paper nearly tore. Only 2 remained untouched. People began to whisper, not names, numbers. How many left? When will it stop? Who's next? Moreland folded the page carefully and slid it into his coat. His hands were shaking. He felt, with sudden and crushing certainty, that the law no longer applied here. Salt Creek changed overnight. Doors stayed locked. Lamps burned until dawn. No one walked alone after dark. The children stopped going to school. The preacher's sermons shifted from mercy to judgment, from salvation to accounting. He spoke of scales and debts, of sins weighed and measured. Every sermon felt like an accusation. Moreland noticed how people began to look at one another, not with suspicion, with calculation. They remembered old arguments, old misfortunes, times when someone else had suffered so they did not have to. And beneath those memories crept a terrible thought. What if it were necessary? Moreland visited the Wynne boarding house again 2 days later. He searched Martha's room this time. Under her bed, wrapped in oilcloth, he found a bundle of letters. None were addressed. They were all apologies. Apologies for decisions made in fear, for silence, for survival. One letter ended with the same sentence repeated again and again until the ink tore the page. I thought it would be enough. Jonah Hale did not come to the sheriff's office willingly. Moreland found him at the edge of town, standing barefoot in the salt flats, staring down at the pale earth like it might open and answer him. "You're hurting yourself," Moreland said. Jonah didn't look down. "It doesn't hurt anymore." Moreland took him by the arm and led him back inside, sat him down, and poured him coffee he didn't drink. "You said it would hear if you spoke," Moreland said. "What is it, Jonah?" Jonah laughed weakly. "We never named it. Names make things real." "Then tell me what it does." Jonah closed his eyes. "It listens," he said. "It writes." Jonah told Moreland about the night Edgar Pike first showed him the Black Ledger. It had been raining salt that night, fine white grit drifting down from a cloudless sky, stinging skin, killing seedlings. The town had been hungry, desperate. Pike had called a meeting in the Ledger House. Only a few were invited. The rest were told later that decisions had been made. Pike opened the black book. The pages were blank then. He said the land remembered every kindness and every cruelty, and that Salt Creek had taken more than it gave. The ledger, he said, was a way to organize repayment. "You didn't have to believe," Jonah said. "You just had to agree not to interfere." Moreland swallowed. "And you?" "I never agreed," Jonah said softly. "I was written anyway."
Some towns vanish for a reason. If you think Salt Creek deserved what happened, leave a comment. And if you don't, stay with me. It isn't finished yet.
Thomas Greer sharpened his tools obsessively. Moreland found him in the forge long after sunset, sparks lighting his face like brief visions of hell. "I won't run," Greer said before Moreland could speak. "Why not?" Moreland asked. Greer set the hammer down carefully. "Because this isn't about justice. It's about completion." Greer admitted everything. How he'd watched Pike alter numbers. How he'd looked away when land changed hands unfairly. How he'd told himself it was for the good of the town. "We survived," Greer said. "That's the lie that makes it work." Moreland saw then that Greer was already dead. He just hadn't stopped breathing yet. Moreland waited until the town slept. He went to the Ledger House alone. Inside, the shelves had shifted. Books leaned toward the center of the room as if listening. The Black Ledger lay open on the desk. Its pages were no longer blank. Names filled them now, some written in ink, others impressed into the paper like scars. Dates, brief notes, not explanations, judgments. Moreland touched the page with his fingertips. The ink was warm. Behind him, a page turned. There was no wind. The ledger closed itself. Moreland ran. When Thomas Greer died, Moreland saw it. Not fully, not clearly. A distortion in the air, like heat over stone. A sense of weight moving against gravity. It carried the ledger without touching it. It did not hurry. It did not hesitate. It knew. Moreland fired his shotgun. The sound echoed across the flats. The shape did not react. Later, when Greer's body was found, his chest opened and emptied, Moreland noticed something worse than death itself. Greer looked relieved. Reverend Bell confessed everything on the third Sunday, not to murder, to silence. "I told them God would understand," he said from the pulpit, shaking. "But God doesn't keep books. We do." No one comforted him. They just listened and waited. Moreland knew when his name appeared. He felt it like a tightening around the heart. The air grew heavy. The salt burned his nose. His reflection in the mirror looked thinner, less solid. Jonah Hale came to him that night. "It's almost done," Jonah said. Moreland nodded. "I know." They walked together to the edge of town. The ground shifted beneath their feet. Pages turned in the dark. "Take me," Moreland said. The ledger hesitated. Jonah watched, tears cutting tracks through salt-dusted skin. Moreland felt the weight of every ignored plea, every signature, every moment he chose order over mercy. The ground opened. Names pressed into him. He understood then. The ledger didn't punish. It remembered. The road doesn't have a name anymore. It used to, once. County Route 6, according to a map printed sometime in the 1950s. But the sign is gone now, and GPS loses signal halfway through the valley. The road narrows unexpectedly, asphalt thinning into something older beneath, packed dirt, pale and powdery. Salt. I stopped there by accident. I work in land surveying, environmental impact assessments, old sites, forgotten towns, places no one bothers to argue over anymore. The kind of work where history lives in footnotes and footnotes get ignored. My instrument started acting strangely as soon as I stepped out of the truck. The ground conductivity readings were inconsistent, spiking, dropping, spiking again. The soil chemistry was off too. High salinity, far too high for the region. No nearby bodies of water, no logical source. The valley was quiet in a way that felt deliberate, not peaceful, attentive. There was nothing left of the town at first glance, just low foundations swallowed by earth, splintered beams, and a church frame collapsed inward like something that had folded to protect itself. Then I saw the house, narrow, 2 stories, sunken deep into the ground. The door was open. Inside, the air smelled of dust and old paper. The shelves were gone, but their outlines remained on the walls, pale rectangles where the wood had never quite touched. At the center of the room lay a depression in the floor, as if something heavy had rested there for a very long time. My boot scraped against something, a book, black cover, no title, perfectly preserved. I picked it up. The pages were thick, rough-edged, hand-bound. Most were filled, names written in careful script, dates beside them, brief notations I couldn't quite bring myself to read closely. Near the back, 2 pages remained blank. Except they weren't blank at all. Something shimmered just beneath the surface of the paper, like ink waiting to rise. I laughed then, because that's what you do when your mind tries to protect you. I told myself it was a relic, a curiosity, something to be archived, cataloged, and explained. Outside, the wind picked up. I heard pages turning. When I looked again, the last page had changed. A name was forming, not in ink, in pressure. I dropped the book. The ground shifted beneath my feet. Later, when the report is filed, it will say the site is unstable. That erosion makes development unsafe. The soil composition presents a long-term risk. The valley will remain untouched. That night, back in the motel, I woke with the taste of salt in my mouth. My hands smelled like old paper. I don't go back. But sometimes, after rain, when the ground turns white in certain places, I swear I can see writing just beneath the surface, waiting, still balancing the books.